Glasgow. It takes place on Saturday, September 28th. It is the semifinals for PFL Europe. As I just told him as we were preparing for this interview, this man's responsible for one of the biggest days in my career covering this sport. I have the utmost respect for him. He does it all. He's been through it all. He's seen it all. The one and only Dan Hardy. Sir, thank you for giving me some time this morning.
Hey, no problem, man. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and you do so much. We'll just jump right into it with PFL Europe. During media day yesterday, I asked Stevie Ray about just how he feels as a veteran, as I'm sure you now feel, right? As someone who's been through it all, seen it all, what he feels about the PFL and the format. And he was like, "Well, I hope whenever my career is over that I get to work with the PFL." And I would say someone like yourself, is that something that you love hearing from guys, not just because they're on the roster, but because MMA as a whole needs more fighters working in the sport?
Yeah, 100%. We were just talking about this with Paul Craig, who's in the building at the moment, and he was saying the same thing. What do we do afterwards? Like, we need these fighters to be staying in the sport of mixed martial arts. Like we see the likes of Chris Lieben getting into judging and Shaolin Hiberio doing refereeing. Like, we need more fighters involved in every level of the sport. Just mainly because they know what the fighters are going through, and they know what these weeks are like for them. So to have the likes of Stevie Ray involved, after his active career, it just makes sense. It makes sense. Keep these guys close to the organizations that they help build.
I've done a lot of work with the PFL this year, and I can't believe it took so long for me and you to finally cross paths, but I'm happy we are. So I've got to, because I hear so much, right? I love everything about PFL. The format, the international leagues, I think it's all kind of laid out with a perfect blueprint to, find yourself internationally and work your way to a global stage. But given the season format, given the international that could lead to the global, what are your thoughts on how the PFL has built this whole thing?
I think the challenge is obviously that we started with the global format. So everyone knows what the global format is. We have 6 weight classes and 10 fighters per weight class and the points scored, etc. But the story of how those fighters get into that bracket is what we've not done well to establish so far in the PFL. So with now these regional leagues setting up, obviously Europe being the first one, MENA, we've got Africa coming as well as several others. Like, we're going to basically have a platform in every one of these regions that we can find the local fighters that are doing well, build them up in their regions in front of their fans, and then move them onto the global roster and have a far more diverse group of fighters fighting at the top level from all around the world. Instead of, like, if you look at, this year, it's been dominated by America, Brazil, and Russia predominantly. And there are lots of other fighters around the world that they could be competitive. They could throw their name in the hat if they've got the platform to get into the system. And obviously, with PFL Europe, we've done that with Dakota. She's transitioned over and she's doing very well. And we'll have other fighters coming from this region and the Middle East as well. So the longer this runs, the more the depth is going to fill out. We're going to have a wider roster, lots of different flags, fan bases all around the world. And then, ultimately, then everyone's eyes go onto the global regular season to see how their fighters do on the global level. I like the format. I think it's very clear for the fighters to kind of know which direction they need to go to keep winning and keep progressing. It takes some pressure off these fighters, like chasing the next opportunity in their career. Like, the year's laid out for them. As long as you keep winning, you're going to keep fighting and keep making good money.
Yeah, and they don't have to worry about politics, right? You just show up, and I'm sure a veteran like yourself appreciates that. These guys and girls don't have to do anything but show up, make weight, win their fight. We'll let you know when the next one is. It's absolutely one of the best. You talked about dominating and Dakota Ditcheva, and that's obviously a prime example of what the PFL is building and what they're doing worldwide. But as the matchmaker, as the commentator, and everything you do, Dan Hardy, how much pride do you have representing PFL Europe?
Oh man, it's representing the fighters, right? It's representing the sport of mixed martial arts. Creating opportunities for these fighters to chase their dreams, to make a career out of their hobby, and to strive for greatness and inspire the people around them. That's really what it's about for me. The PFL is the platform, and the PFL have given me the opportunity to do this. But always, it comes back to the fighters, right? We've got to make sure that the fighters are well looked after and well respected, and moving through a career that makes a lot of sense. Keep winning, pick up the European belt, move on to the global roster, etc., etc. Have a path laid out for you so you can just focus on being the best you can be. Like you said, there's not the politics of calling out this person, try and get this top 15 opponent, and that can be very, very discouraging, especially if the likes of Tony Ferguson, you have to fight 10 people before the opportunity pops up. It's a clear path here.
Yeah, and I think some people we look at on the global side, right? Impa Kasanganay, these guys could say, and even Jakob Kazuba in PFL Europe, he could have said, "I won this already." And when I spoke to him, he's like, "No, I wanted to do it again." He told me if he had the choice between global or Europe, he would have came back to Europe no matter what in 2024. You gotta love that sense of pride that these fighters have. Speaking on PFL Europe, Stevie Ray main event. I mean, we're in the semifinals. Chanel Dyer is another one that everyone's looking at, following that similar path to Dakota Ditcheva. What are the biggest kind of key points you're looking at in Scotland this weekend?
Look, we've got a card that's stacked with even matchups, right? This is what I love about these cards. I take pride in putting a fighter in a matchup that, yes, they can win, but they can also definitely lose it, right? That's what makes it most interesting for the fans. Like main and co-main event, Stevie Ray against Lou Long, Rob Whiteford, Roger Huerta. They're both very evenly matched fights. And it's the same all the way down the card. Chanel's got a very tough opponent in front of her, someone that fought Dakota in the finals last year. So there's a pedigree to Valentina Skititsi. That's going to be a good step up for Dakota. And, even look at the lightweight division, right? You mentioned Jakob Kasuba, right? Last year's champion. He comes back. He wants to win the belt again. He knows he needs more experience to compete against the lightweights on the global roster because lightweight's a very deep division. So for him to come back and put himself back in this mix it's very admirable. But at the same time, you look at the bracket. He's got Daniel Skititsi, who's got a beautiful heel hook win over Alex Chisov, who everyone thought was going to be the PFL Europe champ. Then on the other side, you've got Connor Hughes and Ignacio Capella, both coming off incredible knockouts. Like that, for me, is one of the most competitive groups of 4 fighters that we've ever seen in Europe. So although Jakob Kasuba's here to win the belt again, like he's in a different mix of fighters here. There's different challenges, and these are all new opponents for him.
Absolutely. Well, before we get out of here, because we don't have too much time, I have to talk about the biggest thing kind of going. And I wanted to address it with you, Dan, because I'm honestly so, and I'm sure everyone in the PFL building I'm so sick of criticism from people who just don't follow, right? It's like you show up to a football game here in the States at halftime and you're like, why is my team, you weren't here for the whole time. You can't talk about it. And that's the battle of the giants. The full card was announced here on Thursday. We know the 3 title fights. We've got Paul Hughes and AJ McKee. And then there's a lot of talent that maybe people haven't heard about. But isn't that the glory in what PFL is doing? Like they're bringing these fighters worldwide who people may not have heard about, and they're bringing them to the forefront so we can all learn and watch them grow together.
Exactly that. Look, you look at the undercard, right? And the main card's solid, but like, I'll draw your attention to one person on the undercard, Ibrahim Ibragimov, right? A lethal individual. Made his debut for PFL in Newcastle, looked absolutely fantastic. Ran through Josh Reed, who's a very tough veteran, and looked very good doing it. He straight away has got the opportunity to head out to Riyadh. He's fighting Nacho Campos, who's a tough Spanish fighter who's going to, really, really push Ibra, especially in the striking ranges. I think that could be a show stealer. It's 2 fighters that the majority of fans have maybe not heard of yet, but they will certainly know these names in the near future. That's a very exciting fight, and I do very much feel like Paul Hughes has got a big test in front of him. I think we can all agree that AJ McKee's a big step up, but you've got to admire the determination of Paul Hughes. He's been wanting these big fights, and I would imagine that this is one of the big fights he had on his wish list. So getting this big opportunity right here is, I think a lot of fighters are going to look at Paul Hughes's direction and think to themselves, you know what, might be worth me considering. If big opportunities and pay-per-view events and Ngannou headlining is in my future, then maybe PFL is in my future.
And I think this would be the perfect way to kind of put a ribbon on this. It's a changing of the guard in MMA with the PFL. It's a changing of the narrative with the battle of the giants. I could sit here and break down, Francis Ngannou, Renan Ferrer, Chris Cyborg, Larissa Pacheco. I just want to talk about the narrative surrounding this event because I don't think that gets enough attention. When you talk about Paul Hughes, yeah, he could have done the, I'm not going to mention any names, Sean O'Malley way of going about rising to the top and kind of slow working it. Paul Hughes, one fight, now he's got AJ McKee with the PFL. When you look at Chris Cyborg coming over, when you look at Paul Hughes coming over and Francis Ngannou signing with the PFL, this Battle of the Giants isn't just here's some of our very best talent. This is, hey, here's a conversation now to be had about if you want another opportunity, the PFL provides it.
Yeah, exactly right. And especially if you look at those top two fights, it's the first time we're going to see Ngannou in the PFL gloves. That's really, really exciting. But he is, the linear heavyweight champion. If he's able to beat Renan Ferreira, then, it solidifies himself right at the top of the sport for me. The only other person in the conversation right now is Tom Aspinall, and that is a conversation I would love to have, Aspinall versus Ngannou. But we also might have another heavyweight superstar on our hands. If Renan Ferreira comes through Ngannou, like a lot of people are expecting him to, we have another legitimate heavyweight superstar on our hands. And then, the co-main event, you've got Cyborg, who's been holding steady as one of the best in the sport for many years. Larissa Pacheco rose to the top, had to go through Kayla a couple of times before she got the victory. But, she's a two-division champion. And the opportunity to fight Cyborg is really that's the crown jewel in the crown for Larissa Pacheco. If she's able to beat Cyborg, I think she replaces Cyborg as the woman to beat on the planet. And I think a lot of people are excited to see the fact that she's got a complete game as well. Like she can grapple as well as she can strike. She's aggressive and powerful and strong, just like Cyborg is. So it's a fascinating co-main event. And I really can't think of anybody you would put in the conversation that would be competitive with either of those two ladies.
I absolutely agree with you. Last one, quick summary, one word, however you want to do it. What should fans expect at PFL Glasgow this weekend?
Craziness. I'm expecting back and forth fights. I'm expecting one round goes one way, one round goes the other. I'm expecting knockdowns and comebacks and some unusual submissions. We've got Stevie Ray with the Scottish Twister. We've got Skatitsi, who's got a great ground game. We've got big punches on the card, and the next generation of Scottish talent. Lorenzo Parente, Mark Ewan, Gemma Auld, Brian Hislop. We've got a great card. I'm very, very excited to get these fights rolling.
Well, all the props to you for putting it all together. All the props to you for all that you do, Dan Hardy. I said it before we started. I'll say it while we're going. And as we finish, I have the utmost respect for you. MMA is better because of the things you have contributed, not just in the cage, but outside of it. And the PFL is much better with you as well. I appreciate the time and opportunity. Hopefully, the more I work with the PFL, I'll get to see you in person and keep up all the great work, all that you do. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, my friend. It's been good talking to you. And definitely we need to get you out to a PFL event very soon.
Thank you.